Now, let's talk for a second about the prelude to World War II and the rise of fascism and Hitlerism, so to speak, anti-communism on the one hand and communism on the other, all the turmoil in Europe. What were your impressions of that? Were you aware of it?
Very much so. I think almost everybody was, because there was so much talk about it, and there was such action against communism in our own country. It got so it was a bit out of hand in a way in which people were willing to go to distress communism and impress our own beliefs. There was a lot of talk about it among people, even in the small towns where it wasn't quite as effective or impressive. But it was the subject more than anything else in those days. It really was. Everybody was seriously against communism, except a few. There's always a few people that want to side on the opposite side, right in our own community. That was what hurt a lot of people. They even tried to think Eisenhower was a communist and things of that sort that just irked everybody, to find out that maybe it was true, and you had to hear about it until you found out that somebody was accusing a lot more than actually
That
existed.
was true even before World War II?
Yes. And I think when we went into World War II, almost everybody was against siding with the Russians. It was one of the things that Roosevelt had a bad time about, is putting our, for example, I was working at the electric machinery company that was making field generators for both England and Russia, because Russia was a part of the system before we were.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked 12 hours a day, 29 days a month, and we felt like it was wrong to be doing that to help the Russians.
Was there actually a feeling of hope among some people that maybe the Germans would beat the Russians, but we would beat the Germans?
I don't think that. I don't think that ever happened. I don't remember ever anybody feeling that way about it. Germany was so badly acting at the time, going into these other countries one after another. I don't think anybody sided with that so much as maybe there were a few, but one of the things we were did that we shouldn't have was putting all of the Japanese, when that part occurred, in camps and so forth, taking away their property. And
But tell me a little bit about what you remember about our first involvement in the war when Pearl Harbor occurred. Can you talk a little about that?
Everybody remembers where they were, what they were doing when we heard that we had been bombed at Pearl Harbor. Isis and I were in church practicing for a play that the church was going to put on in the afternoon. And we came out of the practice, got in our car to go home, and we heard it over the radio. And I can remember almost just how we felt and everything when we heard it. It was terrible. We thought it was the most terrible thing that could happen to us. And we knew that the war was on for us right then, for sure, against the Japanese. And we were, of course, followed by a lot of problems the first part of the war was really, we were going down, 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 as you remember, and with Japanese. Same time we were gaining ground on the Germans. So that was the general feeling. I guess each person had his own concerns mostly, I suppose, and discussed it with one another.
Actually, in 1942, the first half or so of 1942, which would have been after the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Germans were gaining ground too.
Yes, but they were turning, and we were planning the
Well, the invasion in North Africa.
invasion and so forth. And we were feeling as though we were going to gain that one a lot. We weren't nearly as afraid of getting that under. There was so much talk with the Japanese that they had us such by surprise, and they were taking everything as it followed Pearl Harbor. They were taking those islands in the Pacific, one after another, just as fast as they could. What was the name of the march? Do you remember?
Bataan?
Bataan.
The Philippines.
Many of our people were tortured by the Japanese on that march from one place to another. I don't remember names so well as a lot of people do about that, but you may have as much knowledge of that as I can remember, and the names of those places. But we just had a great deal of fear, much more fear of the Japanese than we did of the Germans.
How about you personally? Did you consider going into the armed forces?
Yes. I actually asked my company, electric machinery company making the generators, if I could go, and they said, well, no, we just applied for you because we need you, we have to have you, you're a tool maker and a machinist and so forth that are just, I was deeply involved in making those generators. And I was one of the people, and not only did they get me sidetracked or
Deferred.
Deferred, but they put me on a group making wages by piecework, which was a good thing, and but I had to do it on the 29-day schedule at 12 hours a day, and for nearly 4 years. You can imagine what that was like.
One day off, that's it, huh?
Well, 1 or 2, depending on the length of the month. I think by and large it turns out closer to 2 days.
And what was life in the United States like during the war? What are some of the things that changed?
Women went to work, for one thing. That was probably the biggest change in our society activity. The women had to take the place of the men that were gone, and Rosie the Riveter and things of that sort. All of the companies were put to work at whatever they could do. There wasn't any automobiles made. You couldn't buy a new automobile. There was a lot of trading were needed in used cars, and
They were making Jeeps, I guess.
they were making Jeeps,
Trucks and tanks and everything.
tanks. That's right. And airplanes were built. Well, ships and airplanes. Liberty ships. You remember that name? And aircraft, just as fast as they could put them together. And we got some pretty big fleets over there after a couple of years.
Not only that, you were supplying the Allies.
We were supplying the Allies. England was really our ally that we just felt necessary to save. And there was a lot of talk about the fact that what we knew about the war was that if the Germans had been smarter, they would have been able to defeat England. Nobody could have stopped it. And you know, the papers and everything else talked about that. And we were, I suppose, rather happy about that situation, that they hadn't gotten thrown out, because that's what, we had a lot of our people over there at the time. Or as it went on, more and more people went over there, and we'd get involved in a lot of more death if he had. If
Great
Hitler had.
strategic mistake that
Yeah.
Hitler made was not invading England and instead going after the Soviet Union.
That's right, and you spoke of that the other day, and that was the significant trend of things at those times, with our delight in the, you know, not taking the English out. And we start to hearing a lot about the development of the atomic bomb. I'm not sure exactly when that started to get, I guess probably about late 43, early 44, when, and Charles Molinar, my friend, for example, got sent first to California and then to Tennessee, and was a part in it, and nobody could. We wanted to go and visit him, and we were, Isis and I, down in Tennessee, and we weren't allowed to come. Nobody.
Top secret, yeah.
And strange things like that happened. They were very. You want to know how a person feels. It's those kinds of things that makes you feel so really put upon because of the war that the war itself was doing to you.
What about rationing and you know, the home front?
I don't know. Rationing didn't seem to bother us near as much, and it was kind of fun to join those places where all the junk you could find, metallic junk, you bring it in so they could use it, and people took all their old equipment in so that it could be refurbished or redone or used over to make the
Scrap metal.
The shortage never really hurt Isis and I did. Some people needed sugar and gasoline, and you know what I did about gasoline, about making my little scooter. And you remember riding on my little scooter? And
I remember when it got crashed or broken and you couldn't ride it anymore, and how unhappy you were about it.
yeah.
What about that? Could you relate what happened?
Well, what happened was that I was driving it to work each morning, and I took a by road across the Highway 6. Is it 6? No,
6th Avenue North?
Yeah, 6th Avenue North, and
That's Olson Highway.
it went by a library where I turned.
The Sumner branch.
A branch.
Yep.
And a truck was coming out of that was, I didn't see it through the building because it was coming out from the back of the building and came right out on the street just seconds before I got to the same place. And so I skidded say the word for me again.
What, you hit the brakes and skidded into the truck, or
Under the truck.
under the truck? Ooh.
I didn't go under the truck. I fell off as I skidded it and let it go under the truck, and the truck ran over and bent the frame altogether. And it destroyed it to the point I couldn't get it back in shape in time to be of any value.
This was a scooter that you actually made from scratch,
Yes.
isn't it?
Well, I made from tubing, and I got the tube of a bicycle to weld into the tubing for my steering, and I put just a board bottom between the tubing that went back to the back wheel, and the back wheel was hung between the two ends of the tubing. And then I bought the gasoline engine, the 1.5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine, and I made a clutch. I made a clutch out of some things that my dad had. I went down to see him and got some parts from there and some of the tubing and did some welding down there. And I had trouble with that clutch, but I finally got it working good enough. So I had to kind of slip the clutch to act as a low on starting.
Did you have more than one gear?
No, just one gear.
Just one gear.
And
But the clutch then would take you out of gear and into gear, that's all.
yeah, well, it would, but I could skip. It was sprung so that I could let it in easy, so it slipped for a while. It started to roll it, and then I could. That was low, and then I'd snap it shut. And later on, I thought of ways I could have improved that, but I was in a hurry to get something to work on. And I had a good relationship with, what was his name?
Goody?
Goody, the man at the filling station. And he would, because I had been his customer a long time, apparently he got a little more gasoline than he asked for, and he could give it to people who needed a lot. But I still didn't take it on any great amounts because I had the scooter, but we were able to drive the car probably more than some. We had a little bit of extra because I did have the scooter, and I had his good wishes.
Let's talk a little bit about your own involvement in World War II. How did you happen to ultimately get called up then?
After when war in Europe was closing, August 13th, I believe, was the date when the armistice was signed with Germany, and I went into the service on August the 10th. So right after I got in there, the war with Europe ended, or in Europe, and what caused to me to be called up is when slightly before this time, when we were getting ready to armistice there, they said anybody that was 26 years old, see, they had cut down a lot on the need for our material any longer. My job was not tough anymore, and they took me everybody off that deferment, and I got ready to go, thinking I would be going to the theater in the Pacific, and that's how I went to Navy boot camp, feeling like I would be made. Well, I took the Eddie test so that I would be able to join the Navy. Actually, only the Army took any of the people required after that 26th age birthday, and unless you could get something like the Navy.
And the test that you took qualified you to go to radar school?
To radar. And we went to boot camp as RTs and first class seamen.
RT is what? Radar tech?
Radar technician.
And so where did you go to boot camp then?
I went to boot camp just outside of Chicago at Green Bay.
No. Waukegan?
Waukegan.
Green Bay is in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I didn't mean Green Bay. That's a word that, yeah, the Waukegan had a acronym, which I don't remember, which was something like Green Bay. I'm sorry, maybe we can
Yeah,
snatch that out and get it in there somehow.
sure. We can edit it.
We were there and all the
It'll
way.
be a naval training station. I know that it was near Evanston.
Yes. And well, it was at Waukegan.
Mm-hmm.
And funny, I used to know those names so well, and I've forgotten them somehow. We're just discussing that part of it. Anyway, we all thought we would be treating great. The rest of the people at boot camp wouldn't talk to us. They didn't like us because we got first class rating, and we didn't have to do some of the things the others did. And we're scheduled to go off to the school or before we went into the service,
You had
into the war area.
Sort of privileges that the others didn't
Yeah,
have.
we had privileges they didn't have. So we, the a comment by put up your sign, put up your flag to the mother, your son is a damned RT. Or take down your service flag, mother, your son is a darn RT.
But on the other hand, radar was extremely important.
Yes, radar had become extremely important in England. It was late in the war when England developed. They were the ones who developed the radar. And boy, that was the big thing. And Navy in particular used radar for underwater and other things.
Anyway, what happened then? You went into the Navy boot camp and then...
By the time I got through boot camp, they had already had the decline of Europe, and it looked like we were in good shape with Japan.
Except that there was the option, was there not, of invading Japan with
Yes.
more than 1 million men, and you were going to be part of that.
That was what was going to be part of it, but got so. I'm trying to think if the date, just what the dates were, such that we thought we were. Whether they had actually dropped the bomb, I think they had dropped one of the bombs just
At Hiroshima.
at Hiroshima, and then it looked like we were not going to invade, and
Well, except that the Japanese didn't capitulate right away, so they
No,
dropped the
they
second
didn't.
one at Nagasaki.
well, that's how. Now I was in what was called an outgoing unit for several months, where all these things were going on, and they were holding us, not sending us yet to the schools, trying to figure out what should be done, because the war was tending to scale down, not so much needs anymore. It looked better. Then the bomb and so forth occurred, and I can't remember quite the time relationships between those. But when it was time for me to leave boot camp, they closed down all of the schools.
Which,
and we were
by
then-
that time then, Japan must have surrendered.
Yes, I think so. I wish I knew the timing a little better now. I did at the time, but I'm not very good at remembering those exact times and their inclusion together.
So what did you do then before you got out of the service?
Well, when they shut down the schools, we were told that we could have the option of waiting or going back to your the naval station nearest your home and helping with the
Mustering out of other people?
mustering out of a lot of your people that are in the Navy. And then just after they said that you had that option, then they came back and said, no, that's where you'll go. And that's when I went to Minneapolis and was
There was a Navy base
at the airport. Yeah, Navy base at the airport. And that lasted for a while, where I was staying there helping on that because I had to wait until my classification came up.
Were you allowed to live at home with your wife
Yes,
and family?
I was allowed to go home at night, yeah. And but I had some nights I had to go and stand guard, so I wasn't able to do it every night, but I could other times. Herb and I started. That's where I met. Well, I met Herb on the way down there, where we were together all the way during service. But we started going out to he was with me, and we went out in my car. I picked him up every day going out there,
And that would be Herb Horner,
that'd be Herb Horner.
who's now deceased.
Right.
And he and his wife remained friends of yours throughout your life, basically.
Correct. Throughout his life, yes.
Yeah. What about, let's talk a little bit about the aftermath of World War II and the GI Bill and what happened to you and what you remember about that time.
Well, let me see how to put that into context. ISIS had been, all the time I was in the Navy, ISIS had been living on a part of my income from the Navy by, I think it was about $90 a month they were giving her at that time. $93 a month was how much she was being paid for the fact that I was in the Navy. I got just a few shekels to spend myself. The most of my pay went back to her. And then we, of course, when I was mustered out, I got all the information about what I was entitled to. And going to college was one of the things that I had always wanted to do, and that was an offer. I could get 2 years more than I spent in the Navy in schooling. And of course I had spent 9 months and 27 days in the Navy, so I got 2 years, 9 months and 27 days worth of schooling that I could take. And so I decided to go into school. And slightly before that, I had started working for Honeywell as a toolmaker. And I actually started with a little company a little bit earlier than that, but I left them and went to Honeywell, but that's kind of inconsequential.
Now, why didn't you go back to electric machinery at that point?
I did. I went back to see what they offered, but what they offered was a job similar to what I had, or a little less than what I had, because they had spots to fill that weren't good enough. And so I went to Honeywell, and well, I went to Honeywell because I found out I was already getting lined up to go into school, and I found that the classes were such that I would have to work nights if I was going to go to school. And so I went to Honeywell and got a toolmaker's job on nights, 4 o'clock in the afternoon till midnight. And I had to go early in the morning to sign up for the classes so that I could fit that time schedule, and I had to go sometimes as early as 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to sign up, and they ran it that way because there were so many.
And this was at the University of Minnesota?
The University of Minnesota. They built several wooden building,
Yeah, right, the temporary building.
temporary buildings for us to go to school in, and they had to have lots of time with all of our people to get them all into school that wanted to go. So I finally got lined up so I could go to school from 8 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. And actually, I'll correct that, it was about 3:50. I had only about 10 minutes to get from school to Honeywell to the job. And I did have a car that I had bought from Stephen.
And the Honeywell job was located where?
4th Avenue, 27th.
Okay, so you would get from the university over to the Honeywell plant and you had about 10 minutes to do it.
I had about 10 minutes to do it. I could sometimes get away a little earlier than that because I closed, the class wasn't held until it was leftovers too.
And what was your major then?
Mechanical engineering.
So you were in the Institute of Technology.
Yeah. And always was in that part of it. I did have to go some special classes at that I could get at Old West High School. I don't know if you remember where that was.
Sure I do.
To get some mathematics that I ought to have gotten in high school and didn't in Magnolia.
That was near Lake and Hennepin.
Yes. And
Near Lake Calhoun.
well, I did that for 2.5 years. And I was a friend of Judge Sheridan at the time, who lived a block from us. We talked about what I was doing a lot. You know. And he worked in another part of Honeywell, but the production engineering, and there was a job for me, and I went to see Honeywell, and they offered me engineering wages, $290 a month, if you can believe that was the starting salary for an engineer out of college. And so that's what I did. I went to work for them, and I, of course, never got my engineering degree, but I got within 100 points of getting it. And I never did go back for it, which I'm sorry about. I always
You
have been.
regret that?
Pardon?
You regret that you didn't finish it?
Yeah, I wish I'd have gotten a degree, but I didn't really ever need it. My progress was such in Honeywell that I did well all the way up until Huter.
Mm-hmm.
Did I cover enough on that particular
I think
point?
so. What was your feeling about the outbreak of the Korean War? Did you have any thoughts about what was happening with communism? Were you afraid of
Yes.
world domination by the communists?
We thought, everybody thought it was terrible that we had to go right back to war so soon. And we were very anti-communist at that time, really behind the South Koreans. But we were not eligible any longer unless you wanted to be
For
for the
yourself?
military.
Yeah, in other words, you were past the age where you would have to go.
Yes. And so we just watched that situation, and we're glad when it came to an agreement not to fight it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Can't say it was a treaty.
What was the general attitude in America after World War II? That America was victorious, and was there a lot of optimism about the future, other than what the communist threat, or not?
Well, I think we felt a great relief in that we were back to running a normal life And we had replaced a lot of the women at that time then. There was so many of the men coming back that needed jobs. And that's the time when Roosevelt put through that reduction, got an agreement with labor to reduce the 50-hour week or the 48-hour week, depending on where you were, to the 40-hour week.
It wouldn't have been Roosevelt, it would have been Truman, because Roosevelt died the war.
Oh yeah, it was Truman, yeah. Yeah, you're right on that. I forgot that he had died and Truman came in just about the time that was taking place.
Well, in general, that was the beginning of the so-called baby boom. All these
Oh yeah.
millions of men that came out of the war came home, the girls quit working, the men married them, and they started having kids.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's when the big baby boom started, and really it was. They had all been away at war, and a few of them, women have been pregnant anyway, on visits or something, but not many, and children born like crazy.
And your friend Herb was there, his kids were all part of the post-war baby boom.
Yeah.
Your children, me and Lynette, were not, because we were born before.
Yeah.
I was born before the war, and Lynette was born during the war.
That's right. And that, you were not quite baby boomers, you were just a little before it.
Mm-hmm. And that was always to my advantage, because wherever I was, there were fewer people in my age cohort, and the big age cohort was behind me. Therefore, it was easier for me to get jobs and so on. There was less competition.
Now, where do we go from there?
Well, I think maybe you could talk a little bit about your career at Honeywell and how you happened to get into Dean Casting in your own business.
Right.
Because that happened in the early 50s, I think.
55, 54 and 50 in and 55 out.
Yeah. Tell us about how you got started into a company with your name that still exists, by the way.
Yes, it does, I know. After I'd been at Honeywell since 1947, I got involved in many different kinds of things in production engineering, but one of them was lost wax process in making castings, and was dealing with the company in Minneapolis that was making a number of castings for Honeywell. And I got, like I got involved with I'm sorry, I get delayed in my talk trying to think of the words I'm thinking of, Bill, but I got very heavily involved in those castings that Honeywell was using, and going and finding out how they made them, and what the process involved, and how you could design the castings right so that material thicknesses was pretty uniform throughout, so there wouldn't be heavy spots that would shrink and other ones that would not fill properly and that sort of thing. A good deal about, I learned an awful lot about investment castings. And I also was dealing with a man who sold materials, and
That wasn't Charlie Bader, was it?
yes, Charlie Bader. he sold materials, but he also did, what's the word for supplying materials to companies? He was a subcontractor.
He was a vendor, or?
Vendor and a subcontractor. And we got very well acquainted and talked about it. He was at that time vending for some castings and so forth, and he thought it would be a good thing if and he'd help me open a casting operation. And we found the building, and I agreed on a date when I would leave Honeywell and go to work on that, and it went pretty well, but we weren't making the kind of profit that he was interested in, and Honeywell had asked if I wouldn't come back because I had left the part of the problem with well, you know what I'm trying to say there, Bill. Yeah,
I don't. No, I don't know. They wanted you to come back because of your knowledge of castings, or what?
No, my knowledge then of
Gyros?
gyros. I'm sorry, I can't think of those words when I want them sometimes, Bill. I know that's not part of the program here you're going to
No,
leave
that's
in,
okay.
but I decided then after just a little over 1 year in Dean Casting to leave, and Charlie Bader would run it himself. And I had right next door in the building was a tool and die make shop that made my dies for, and he took over running the organization. Well, he took over making all the tools and so forth, and the man that I had taken with me from Honeywell, who
Ted Knudsen?
Ted would be he'd be the operating manager.
And did that work then?
It worked, and they, of course, were relatively successful, and they got more and more successful. And,
Did they buy you out then? Or?
oh yeah, I sold out pretty cheaply because I hadn't really contributed much in the way of profit up till then, but just enough to start building the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that it wasn't really my kind of job to run an organization like that. It seemed like the only thing that I had to do was make sure that the women's toilet was full of paper and things of that sort, rather than being able to really put my time into making castings. So I decided it was worth going back to Honeywell.
And you stayed with Honeywell up until your retirement. How many years did you have with Honeywell?
Well, I had a total of 34, but I only got credit for 25 because they didn't give me any credit for the time. Their first being with them.
When they wanted you to come back, you probably should have said, "I'll come back if."
But I didn't. I never even thought of it at the time.
Well,
it was a little bit later, just a little after that Honeywell changed their policy, and if you had a span where you were only gone 1 year, they'd give you the jump and count what you did before and what you did after. I started in 1947 and I quit in 1980. And
well, such is life. Well, let's
34,
quit.
33 years.
Let's quit there, and we'll do it one more